Where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, we don't want to go to war today.
You are about to witness the most amazing man-made jewelry ever created. The original multicolor mood ring. This is the ring that senses your deepest feelings. Scientifically developed, the incredible Chroma Stone senses thermal changes deep within your body, reflects all your mood changes in a fascinating kaleidoscope of color, responding to your deepest secrets, your most hidden emotions.
Oh my gosh, everybody. It's Rings of Power time. Woo!
Oh. Look at that beautiful dynamic background.
Not again.
I know. I'm like awkwardly trying to like get the episode. It's like, no, look at me scrolling through this video. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna take this down temporarily.
Ross, your enthusiasm reminded me of the Monty Python and the whole search for the Holy Grail.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. You know, when they're like the minstrels and stuff where they're walking around the map and things and everyone rejoiced and they're like, yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god. Well, you're bringing the video down, everybody. You're bringing the video down. As we're here, everybody, once again to review, to sort of talk about / review Rings of Power episode 5. I assume everybody's done their homework.
I did do my homework, and I definitely didn't do it an hour before this podcast started.
Well, it's fresh on your mind then.
It's so fresh. Steaming pile. Anyway, let's get started.
There's usually something worth talking about before we move into these episodes, like how are things going. Overall, as we talked about on the podcast on the main, it seems like between the second and the third week of this show, they lost something like 51% of viewers. On top of that, Amazon is claiming 40 million viewers. But that's over a span of 11 days and includes the first 4 episodes. So it's like, we don't know how that's distributed. So I don't know how much of a baller claim that is that their show's doing real well. It seems like they are hemorrhaging viewers and the show is getting less interest as time goes on, despite the fact that the show has a lot less people watching it since the first season. And as I drag you all along into reviewing this as well.
And I'm glad you are. I've learned so much about myself, about modern corporate media,
personal
and about
discovery,
hack Hollywood writers. And frankly, I'm worse for it. And honestly, I'm beginning to begrudge you this. But, you know...
anything to damage friendships and make things worse. Hence the beginning of each of these episodes that has me whipping you all into shape to watch this thing.
Back to the old grindstone, eh?
Where there's a whip, there's a way, everybody.
Yeah, that's what they say, and it's true.
That's what they say. But we're into Rings of Power episode 5. And we're at the Halls of Stone, as it's called.
Oh.
So we're going to chug into this episode, and it opens up, as some have pointed out, and some of different reviews that I've seen, that they open up with a scene that's reminiscent, sort of leans on visually with the lighting of the lamps in Return of the King, where they scale over the sort of the mountain peak as it pulls in one direction. I don't know if I would directly say that, but visually there is some similarities. And they have done a lot of remember this visually in the movies you like.
Yeah, it's certainly in previous episodes. Like maybe not directly like you said, but yeah, it's certainly a light callback.
Yeah, visually in some way. It's like... You ask the cinematographer to give us an establishing shot over a mountainside, and they're like, we're going to make it look like other thing. And we get... we get a cut to rings. The dwarven rings, the ugliest rings imaginable created.
Oh
with
God,
The
poorly
ring
cut
pops.
diamonds. The ring pops.
dude,
Yeah, the ring pops of power.
who's the designer of this stuff? I mean, genuinely, how did they get to this point where, like, yeah, that looks good. I mean, it literally looks like costume jewelry you buy out of a bag at a Spirit Halloween. Like, I don't. I mean, they ape so much off of the Lord of the Rings films. I mean, did nobody look at the very beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring and go, "Well, man, those are tasteful and understated"?
Well,
We're
and
not gonna
maybe
do
there's
that.
bias. Jason admitted to heavy bias watching the show.
Oh,
that it's
yeah.
difficult for him to watch it objectively. But if I'm comparing it to the Rings of Power, which weren't hugely emphasized but did exist in the movies, they're elegant, they're beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
they look really good. I mean, Arwen's
Look like an actual
little,
jeweler made them.
Yeah, Arwen's pendant is very elegant. You know how many white women bought that thing?
Oh, so many.
Just high-end jewelry. Silver, would you really be into the Arwen pendant from Lord of the
I was
Rings?
just gonna say, dang it, I want one.
Yeah, you
Even
do.
Star.
The Even Star.
They had some great jewelry in the
Oh,
Lord of
they
the
have
Rings.
good-looking jewelry in Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings. It's
I
like they asked
have one
actual
of Reginald
jewelers.
rings.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do.
Very close-in shots of these rings and how important they are to the Dwarven Kingdom. And he picks the ugliest one of them all. Like, of these, which one would be
Blue
the?
ring
Which
pop.
one would you pick? This one isn't too bad.
Do
I
you
don't
have
like
it on the screen? Because I know C.
Yeah,
I
There
was
it
showing
is.
them the whole time. So the camera was on the whole time, was it?
It super was, yes.
So here's
I
our
don't
shot
know,
of the
they-
rings.
They all look pretty terrible.
I-
But I think the blue one
That he picks up.
might actually be my choice just because I like blue
Well,
better.
there's just the
But it
stone is
is
so
a terrible ring.
awfully big, like uncut.
At least it doesn't
weird.
have big castle crenellations, though. Oh my God, a little on the nose, don't you think?
I'm no jeweler, but
Oh,
usually what
don't-
happens.
Don't play yourself short in your decades of jewelry experience.
Don't be so bashful and modest. Come now.
We know what you went to school for.
But usually when you put a stone in a ring, they shape it, they facet it so that it shines better, that it looks attractive in the setting. But these look like they just slapped any old ring or any old jewel in there and said, you know what, we're done.
The
Good
stones
enough,
in the
Al.
elven rings are so bloomin' ugly.
Oh,
Yeah, they are.
God, they really are. I mean, and not to push forward too much, but we see a pickaxe later in the episode, and it looks cheap and garbage.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah,
does
it looks
so many of the
plastic.
props in this look terrible and look wrongly? Oh my God, the axes that Gimli carried around in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, like they look proper. Like, yes, they had a very distinct style, but they looked like they actually fit his hands and like they
weren't
were
oversized.
actually usable.
Yeah, you got a lot of oversized, awkwardly like clunky shaped items in The Hobbit.
Yeah. Ugh, the visual style sometimes of this. I mean, and other times the show it's fine. I mean, it's not amazing. But sometimes it just fails completely, and the rings are the biggest failure, considering the show is called Rings of Power.
Did anyone notice that they proposition we should have these rings, and then King Durin accepts the rings off screen?
Yes, dude. All right, I literally thought I was having a stroke. I thought I missed an episode or something. Like, I
No,
literally
you're
had to
not
think
wrong.
if I missed a podcast last week and I forgot to catch up.
Like, he expresses hesitancy. He's like, oh, I don't know. And then off screen, I guess he decides that we're going to take these rings.
And
And now
I'm
we're
taking possession of
full-blown
all
rings.
of them.
Well, and there's a lot of schizophrenia in this show where Disa goes, we desperately need to go meet with the elves because this could save our people. And immediately afterwards, she's like, this was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Just-
well, not only is there a lot of flip flopping of characters here, where they're like, we need to go in this direction, and then immediately in the next episode they're like, oh, that was wrong. We have to do something else without really having any motivation for the change of a part there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so much that relies on coincidence. You know what I mean?
Yes. Mhm.
There's just this thing happens, and they're like, "Oh, it means this." I was like, "Wait, what? Where did you get that from?"
Superficially, I'm going to do a quick poll here. Superficially, where do you think this episode ranks in the other episodes we see of season 2?
I
Boy, that's
don't
hard.
think it was. I don't think it was as bad as 3.
No.
I think 3 was the worst so far, but I would put it below 1 and 2.
The reason why I ask is Drinkers Podcast. They claim this was the best one.
Well, here's what I was going to say. It is the most exciting one after a bevy of boring as shit episodes. However, all the excitement comes at the cost of any sort of reason or like tracking of a story. Like it's just dumping it out into your lap and going like, "See, things are happening now," and you just go, "But okay, what happened before though?" Like it just felt very sudden that like all of a sudden now there's excitement
I mean,
when
being
it
the
was just a
best
slog.
of bad episodes still makes it bad. I mean, Silver, what do you
Feel
think
bad.
of I don't know if I've decided whether or not this is the best one, but where do you think it places?
That's very difficult to say.
They all seem
think
like a blur to
mine-
me. It's hard to.
Yeah. I'm trying to even remember the other episodes.
Might be a problem with the 3-episode launch, by
Some
the way.
spiders at one point. There was ghosts in
Yeah.
another one.
All I remember is firefighter spiders.
Fire spiders.
And how adorable they are.
Oh.
I know. So cute. Yeah. I couldn't decide if this one was boring to me or more interesting.
Boy, those are definitely two emotions you
Yeah.
want to confuse your audience with.
I don't know, because on one hand, it felt the least offensive to me, not knowing much about the original lore. It also felt slow and just kind of like, okay, we're trudging along here, like talking about the rings again. You never see Galadriel in this until the very end in the last 2 minutes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and no hobbits. Thank Christ.
And no hobbits. It's just going back and forth. Because I like the dwarves. Of all the races in this, I think the dwarves are the least annoying to me.
They are certainly dwarfy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so I liked focusing on the dwarves more. That's probably why I liked it more, but then again, I'm like, you're just talking about the rings for an hour. I'm bored.
I mean, not to reiterate conversations we've had before, but I'm going to say season 1 was so bad, like offensively bad,
Yeah.
that season 2 almost seems good by comparison.
Yeah.
Boring, nonsensical at times, but season 1 was so offensive. We don't need to drag out sort of meta conversation. But King Durin gets this ugly ring. And he walks in because, as we recall, there was an earthquake. They don't have light. And their crops are dying. And he shows up with this ring. And suddenly he can point it exactly where we need to dig. And everyone's really skeptical because that's a support wall. You see. But King Durin is like, give me the axe, and I'm going to do it myself. And he just starts whacking at it. And then it gives us an impression of a passage of time. And we don't know how long he is beating at this mountain, I guess.
This is one of the times in the show where the passage of time actually matters. You know, or they make it matter, is what I should say.
Right. Well, he gets a breakthrough. And it has been pointed out. Anything odd about this scene here?
That they're
That's this
they're
exact
so
moment.
close to the surface here.
That is odd. Why weirdly they're so close to the surface and they couldn't figure out how to get there? That's confusing. He was digging so much lower than that.
Yes.
Why is the hole so much higher than he was? And he couldn't even reach hitting that point. It's like he was hitting lower on the wall, and then just a hole appears above him. And I know they placed the hole higher to give you the God rays effect, but if you think about this moment, it's like, oh, that hole is way higher than where he was swinging.
Yeah.
Well, in the shot where it shows
He's
him
looking
digging,
up at it.
it's almost like he's looking straight at where he's hitting,
Yes.
and then suddenly he's like looking up through the mountain. And, yeah.
Rhett, I have an explanation.
Oh,
All right. Well, so in Return to Moria, which I think is an accurate depiction of mining in Moria,
Interesting. Okay.
sometimes you have to jump, like you hit the pickaxe, swinging your pickaxe button, right trigger in this case, and then you jump immediately after you hit that, and you are able to jump and hit the wall that you are trying to aim for. Maybe that's what he was doing.
With sufficient force, he was jump swinging.
Yeah, that must be it. I mean, that's got to be.
Technique.
It's a secret. I mean, he is a king. He should know that technique. And by God, I think this proves he does.
And you're telling me you could generate the same amount of force when you're standing in midair?
Oh well, listen. When I'm getting at that sweet silver or perhaps iron ore, I'm getting it off that wall by doing that jump swing. I'll tell you, it's coming off.
I have questions about the physics of it, but let's not dwell. Let's not dwell too much. But they are blown away that this ring apparently is capable of guiding him into directions of where the sunlight will come from. And later it suggested he knows where ore is within the mountain.
Yeah, like he has wall hacks in, and he can just see
Yeah.
the ore beneath him.
Yeah, but he walks along and he's like, dig here. And then they can dig there. And so this is my biggest problem with this episode, this moment. Did anyone find it as confusing as I did?
Yes.
So he goes on this speech as he's talking over all of the dwarves. And he says, we are no longer, unlike the surface dwellers, we are not slaves to the light. I'm paraphrasing here. And then he goes on to say that basically living in the mountain, we are not slaves to the light and the need to sleep and wake in cycles, that we can make our own light. And then I thought to myself, but that's still from the sun, so you are slaves to the light?
Also, is he saying we no longer
yeah.
sleep? Like, what's happening with this speech? Who wrote this?
Like we bring daylight to us.
Just
But I
the
was like,
inane babblings of a lunatic.
Doesn't it go
it's
away at night, though? Like, isn't that...
Yeah.
I have
not
made
like
the sun rise.
Yeah. He suddenly his ring made the sun pause right over Moria, and when he needs it to, he'll send it away.
Well,
what?
and he gives this speech about we are no longer slaves to the light. And I turned to my mother and I was like, but doesn't it still get dark out?
Oh, listen, how dare you question the king? How dare you?
You might be filtering the light through a series of mirrors to supply your crops, but there still is darkness. Like,
No, he solved it. Didn't you hear him? He saw, like, now the sun no longer sets because I have mirrors. I fixed the problem. It's now back to where it was yesterday, but we are no longer slaves to light.
except for when the sun's not out or it's cloudy.
Until 5 hours from now, when
is
the
this
sun
a
goes
speech that somebody who goes full solar would give, where they're like, "I am no longer slave to the cycles of the sun, except for I super am slave to the cycles of the sun." Because
Except
if it
for,
is
please
not,
God.
because if the sun's not out or it's cloudy, I get 0 power.
I am screwed.
I was so confused as to what this
It was-
speech was
when I
trying
was,
to tell me.
When I was listening to this speech, I'm like, what makes you different from the surface dwellers here? Because the sun still rises and sets for them like it does for you.
It's
I mean,
truly
no.
the most bizarre speech.
I was terribly confused. I'm gonna take it off screen and I'm gonna let it play here for a second and see if I can't read this. Because I was baffled. Let's see. Here we bring the sun to us. I'm reading this faster than the speech he's giving. At last, it is daybreak once more.
I mean, I guess you
in
bring
our
the sun
mountain.
to you.
Everyone is cheering.
Sort of.
And then he goes on to, then they start cheering. Oh, maybe I skipped too far ahead. Anyone notice this moment with Disa and the other We Sing It Rocks crew that seem really annoyed
Yeah.
that they're no longer like the
This-
center of
Oh.
attention?
This seemed like a jealousy thing.
Yes, it did.
I mean-
As opposed to, because immediately she's like, I don't trust them. It's like, but the way you're displaying these characters, as opposed to don't trust these rings because there's something nefarious, you're displaying as, I don't trust it because you're taking her gerbs.
Yeah,
Grr.
You know, what this
it
like
seemed
to me?
it seemed very very petty at this point.
That was the response I got from it. At any rate, we are now back with the elves and Eregion, and Celebrimbor is giving a little speech talking about this new door, because remember that door in
Yeah,
Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I do.
And there are by the way, there are very few things that exist that we know exactly what they look like. And the door to Khazad-dûm is one of them, the door to Moria. And the reason why is Tolkien actually drew this door himself down onto a piece of paper. So this is exactly what it's supposed to look like. Which is why it looks exactly like it does in the Lord of the Rings movies, because we know what it looks like. Tolkien wrote
which
it
is
down.
nice.
So if you're
At
like,
least
oh,
they
that
didn't
looks a
screw
lot
this
like the
up.
movie, and it's like, yeah, because we know what it looks like. At any rate, they open up this conversation where it's like, yay, cooperation with the dwarves. We made this door. The problem with this elven dwarven cooperation, I hate to do this because we reference the previous work so much, is the relationship between Khazad-dûm and the elves of Eregion span like thousands of years. The cooperation. And that's why the door was built at one point. But it feels like they're cramming this moment in because they're like, if we don't talk about this door being built, we're not going to have enough time because we're going to destroy Khazad-dûm really soon. So we better bring it up. That's what it feels like is happening in this moment, where all of this should have happened over a span of 1,000 years, if not more, of cooperation between the two and coordination and that sort of thing. So this feels like it's shoved in there just so that everybody can go, oh, I know those doors.
Ooh.
Yeah.
This is yet another time. This is yet another time where we get the reference back to, oh, you remember this door?
Yeah.
You remember that scene?
Well, once again, this show has a hard time with time and space, and is truncating time when it is convenient, and not at other times.
Well, there's another big issue moment later on, which we'll talk about, that has an issue with time and space, because he collects all these dwarven messengers from different dwarven kingdoms spanning Middle Earth, and they all show up immediately. And you're like, wouldn't this take months to gather these people together? There's been some conversation and some curiosity. I don't know what everybody's reaction is to how Anatar is acting at this moment. But he gives off, I don't know how to describe it other than petty, insecure wife.
Yeah, dude. Yes, I like literally like that. Yes, I like whether he's talking to Celebrimbor or whether he's talking to this lady that he's kind of hitting on weirdly. Either way, he just comes off like oh no, that's fine. Like,
I'm unhappy with this. What's wrong? I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it. Like, just what the fuck?
Silver,
I mean, I guess
as a
that's a
resident-
form of manipulation, but
Yeah, as a resident woman, what did you think about how he was acting?
I mean, exactly what you were saying. It's definitely like, oh.
Well, am I being
nothing.
unfair that he's acting in a weird emotional way that's not very guy-like?
No, he definitely is acting like that, I think. Just like put all the sort of blame onto Celebrimbor is what he's doing throughout all this. Like, oh, I didn't do anything. You know?
I mean, I don't want to lead you into conclusions, but when this is going on, it's like, okay, Anatar's supposed to be manipulating Celebrimbor. All right, so yeah, he's supposed to be manipulating him. But the way they're presenting his ability to manipulate is, it's like, well, I want to make these man rings, and he's like, well, I don't think we should, and he's like, ugh. Well, I guess I'll do it myself, and it's like, what is it? Like, how did he suddenly become an emotional lady on her period? Like, I don't understand.
and hasn't
why
he
they're
revealed himself to be like an angel to Celebrimbor?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's acting manipulative like some toxic wife or girlfriend would.
Yeah, so it's like,
There's no
do angels
slight,
act like this?
suggestions. There's no trying to convince him it's his idea.
No.
The writing isn't clever. It's presenting him like a manipulative girlfriend, and it's awkward. Like, I don't understand what they're trying to present here. He's literally doing he walks away slightly annoyed, and Celebrimbor has to go comfort him like his girlfriend's pissed about something.
I mean, just off the top of my head, a better type of manipulation you could do, because you've revealed yourself to be an angel to this man, and now you need to like get him to do what you want. So just be like no, we can't do it for the rings for men, like blah blah blah, gives his reasoning, and then you go, yes, and of course you're absolutely right, my lord. Like it's a great idea, but when you. And I would just plant a seed of doubt with like a like off comment, like not an obviously off comment, but who would want to have such glory in that, like just some stupid little comment, and then just like plant the seed. That would require you to write for the whole fucking season and not episode to episode, but like have him be like a weird little like wormy, like, oh yes, of course you're absolutely right, and then just like plant a little seed of doubt somewhere, and then just Instead, he's acting like like he's got PMS.
Yes. Jason, is there something weird about what he's doing here?
He seems less like the consummate manipulator that we know he should be, and he's just like trying to. It's like he's trying to manipulate Celebrimbor by making him feel guilty for hurting his feelings, as opposed to, like you said, sowing those seeds of doubt where it's like, look, if we, you're right, the men don't need the rings, blah, 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 but, there could be some jealousy there, and maybe it'll come back to bite us.
But it's more emotional manipulation rather than sort of reason.
Right, which that's the problem. It needs to be reason manipulation, not, oh, you hurt my feelings. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe if I do this, it'll make you feel better. It's like, no, that's the wrong thing that we're doing here.
Anatar's pouting in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a teenage girl.
He is. He's being a teenage girl.
He's a teenage dirtbag.
I don't want to come across. I don't know how to phrase this.
I know what you're
come
gonna say.
across. Look, so I watched a show recently. It's not. It's interesting. I like parts of it. There's other parts I don't like. A show called Sunny on Apple, right? And it's about a lady living in Japan, and they have like robot assistants.
Right.
And needless to say, for some reason, she ends up in the countryside, and they're holed up in an abandoned shrine. And this bear attacks the shrine, and it's mostly like growling and shaking the building. You don't see this stupid bear. And she suggests, her and her girlfriend, that bears are afraid of noise. It might scare them off if they make a bunch of noise. And so they both start singing Dolly Parton, "I Will Always Love You,"
What?
really loudly. And I turn to my mother and I go, no man wrote this scene.
No.
Not one man wrote a scene where the two girls are belting out, "I will always love you," to scare a bear away from attacking the shrine they're sleeping in.
Good
And when I'm
Lord.
watching Rings of Power, I'm thinking, I don't think a man wrote this episode.
No.
Because I don't
Gonna be
think any
honest.
guy wrote that this is how a natural interaction would go between two people. This seems like the perspective, not to be sexist, the perspective of a woman, how she might manipulate a man.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Silver, will you condemn me and cancel me forever? What do you think?
I will not condemn you and cancel you forever because no man would manipulate like
No, they wouldn't.
Not another man.
So,
that. Yeah.
so some big
This is-
burly guy writes down, Anatar pouts in the corner.
Ooh, and
Yeah.
he just gave him such a good pouting. Ooh.
Gives him the
This isn't
silent
even
treatment.
how this isn't even how a man would manipulate a woman.
No.
No.
No, not even like not in an emotional sense. Definitely not.
No.
Like it would be a very different kind of thing.
Gaslighting perhaps, or some, but
Yeah.
there wouldn't be any sort of emotional, like, but yeah, to move on, they have this conversation, and he keeps pushing that we need to make these rings for the men. And my gripe with this, so look, at this time in the lore, and I apologize for referencing the lore, but this is an inevitability. At this time in the lore, there are basically the greatest kingdoms on Middle-earth are kingdoms of men. Numenor and their great rulers and what have you. Numenor is
Ingmar.
massive, a grand kingdom. And they seem to be leaning on this idea of, I don't trust men, they're weak. But at this time, that wouldn't be a conclusion they would make.
No.
The greatest kingdoms on earth are going to be men at this point. And from my perspective, this mistrust of men seems to be leaning on how it was presented in the Lord of the Rings movies with the "men are weak" line
Yeah, that's exactly what
from
I thought too.
Elrond. Despite the fact that in lore, not in the movies, that's inaccurate. Because Isildur never had a moment where he stood at the precipice and goes, no, I'm going to keep it. Isildur picked up the ring. Nobody knew how bad it was. He took it back to Gondor, and he basically went, oh, this is bad. Like, I don't trust this. And basically went on a trip to go see Elrond to ask for advice, and that's when he was ambushed, attacked, and killed. Isildur wasn't actually weak in the books. He foresaw that the ring was going to be a problem and went to go talk to Elrond on what we should do about it, and that's when he died. But the movies present him as being weak so that they can create this dynamic with Aragorn, where Aragorn looks at his ancestor as too weak to have destroyed it, but I'm going to not live up to that temptation or that legacy of my ancestor being weak. That's how the movie presents it as. The Rings of Power show is leaning on a line from the movies and not from the actual lore where men are weak. And so now they're just going, well, men are weak. We can't give them rings, when there would be no justification for this, because men are the greatest kingdoms on Middle Earth at this point.
Yeah.
Why would you distrust the men if it was? And the only reason is they're pointing at a line from a movie that has nothing to do with this show. Am I wrong?
No,
I think you're right.
The other thing I want to point out is that, and we mentioned this before when we were talking about the last season. The Elven Rings came last.
Sure.
They were supposedly pinnacle of developing the rings
Jason.
of men, and from developing the rings of the dwarves. That at that point he it's like he perfected it, and that's why we got the Elven Rings.
Sure.
And so at this point it really doesn't make sense to go backwards like they've done here, where they're like, oh, we made the Elven Rings first, and now we're gonna do the ones for the men and the dwarves and the men, because it doesn't make sense logically in the progression.
Well, no, I agree. And this is a grievance, a gripe that we had in the last episode. Yeah. But this show is, in the logic of this show, they're doing it backwards. Okay, fine. Here's my question then, because it's confusing. Why 7 for the dwarves?
Did you pick up on that too?
Why 9? Why did he say we need to make 9 for the men? Why did they pick the number 9?
Well, then he
This
says something about the
episode
power of
claims-
3.
Claims we're going to triple down on it or something?
Yeah.
Now,
But that
what they
doesn't
could have
explain
done,
why.
what they could have done is they said the 7 dwarven kingdoms and a ring for each, and the 9 dwarven and the 9 kings of men, and we need to make 9. But instead, they don't justify the number. They just say we started with 3 and we're just going to make more every time.
See, the logic at that point, when he jumps from the 3 to the 9, that makes in the fact that it's like, well, we had 3, and if we give 9 to the men, that's, this doubling down kind of thing. But that doesn't explain the 7. If it had been 6, if we went from 3 to 6 to 9, that would have made sense. But we didn't, and we don't really have a. Well, there's 7 dwarven kingdoms, so we should make 7, and there's the 9 great mortal men kingdoms.
But that at least would justify the number. But the way they justify the number is we're making 7.
Right.
Okay.
But we have Middle Earth is strangely devoid of anything.
Hey, we're coming back to my favorite gripe about the show.
The emptiness of the show.
What fucking human kingdoms? Where are they?
Exactly.
You talking the grub people that live in ruins? Where are they? I don't see them.
So far, there's only been one major human kingdom, and that's the Numenorians.
They're going to give
So
one
are we
to
going to give
Theo.
all 9 to them?
They're giving one to shitlord Theo.
I mean, what an
Seriously.
insult. One of the great kings of men. Oh, you mean the kid that used the heroin sword and then was living in a ruin of a former Numenorian colony? Like, what? That makes...
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, king.
It's weird because these... To flesh out the story and to fix a lot of these problems, it would take one line or one slight aside. And it's like, they literally could have had this conversation when they're making the Dwarven Rings. Well, how many should we make? And it's like 7. Why 7? For the 7 Dwarven Kings. Okay. That's it. That's all they had to do. Lest we forget, and I'm going to rewind here, a point that at no point nobody points out and addresses, despite the fact that they're very accurate with this door that was designed by Tolkien. How many stars are in that?
7.
Yes. Why?
Because of the 7 dwarf lords. 7
The
dwarven
Dwarven
kingdoms.
Realms, the 7 Dwarven Kings, yeah. The 7 realms of the dwarves. It would have been so easy to explain why 7 was the necessary number. And then you could justify it was like, well, 9 for the 9 kings of men.
Yep.
But the show feels very small, and there's very little justification for any of the decisions that they make.
Oh, yeah.
Are we being over... Since we have Ross here, who doesn't care about Lord of the Rings lore necessarily, are we being overly picky for a fantasy show? Do we really need to find out why they made 7? Does it matter?
Well, the show itself is trying to tell you that it matters when it brings up, like, why 9 and this, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's trying to tell you why it matters, but again, it comes back to the argument of they want to have their cake and eat it too. Well, you need to, like, yep, and that's the basis of the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien stuff. Like, you're gonna have to deal with it. Every explanation they come up with in this show of why people do things or things happen is just, it ends up being stupid.
Well,
Their characters end up stupider for it, and it just weakens everything.
Well, and the worst part is there actually are explanations, but they're not using it.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, but we're smarter than that.
And I know we're being overly analytic of these rings, but it's called Rings of Power. It's important.
Yep.
So here's my other grievance. And I don't know. I'll present it to everybody, but I'd like to get Silver's opinion on this first. So, why did they make the Elven Rings? What does the show say why we need them?
Did they say why, or was it all due to like the survival of the elves thing?
The survival of the elves, like goo is taking over their tree, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So and they found out that Mithril scares away the evil goo. And it's like, well, we're going to have a lot of Mithril so that all the elves can be protected. What if we don't do that? What if we make 3 rings that are so powerful that the 3 bearers can scare away the evil or the goo? Am I wrong? Anybody?
No, that's That's how I understood it.
So that was the reason for making the rings. The whole justification, absurdly inserted into the show, not lore accurate whatsoever. But that's the show's internal logic. Evil is spreading through the world. We need these rings to stop the fading of the elves. Okay. To stop the fading of the elves. Why did they make 7 dwarven rings?
No clue.
Great question.
Well, what's the justification in terms of the logic of the show? Because the rings are supposed to help protect against the fading of the elves and the spreading of the goo.
I didn't Anatar Sauron say something about sharing this power with the dwarves?
But the justification was to
something.
protect the elves and the goo evil, or the general evil. That wasn't a problem that was happening with the dwarves.
No.
So why make dwarven rings? Because you've already established the justification for the rings. This is what the internal logic of the show says. Then why do the dwarves need them?
Or rock
Don't
goo.
know. Rock goo.
Can anyone help me? Can anyone help me?
Didn't they start making the rings before the tunnel collapses? And
Yes. I think so.
Yeah. Well,
then I have no idea what the internal lot, like what Anatar was saying to Celebrimbor, why they needed it, other than we need to share this power, quote unquote. Like, that's what I remember.
Well, it's like,
I mean,
what about rings for the dwarves as well? And immediately I'm like, do the dwarves have goo problems?
Yeah, like a question Celebrimbor should have asked, you mean?
It's like, oh, are the dwarves fading? Is that why they need mithril, so to speak? Why would they need mithril? It's all over their flipping mountain. Isn't that technically protecting them? Why would they need rings?
So.
But because there's no implication in the creation of the Elven Rings that we need them because they're powerful and they do things. The only implication in the internal logic of the show is that the rings protect from the evil that's spreading through the world and the elves. And if it wasn't for these rings, we'd have to leave. That justification doesn't help or doesn't work for the dwarves because they don't have those
dwarves,
problems. And at no point did they say, but they give us powers. They said the dwarves need them. Why? I don't know.
I mean, obviously, from Sauron's point of view, since he is tainting and
Well, he
twisting
knows
the rings,
why he's doing that,
Yeah.
but what's the general justification for it?
but he can't give that justification, obviously, to Celebrimbor here. He needs to come up with a different justification. He needs to say, obviously, that this will help protect the. I mean, even if he just said, "Look, we know the evil is spreading. This will help protect the dwarven kingdoms from that evil."
Okay, yeah.
That would have been
would've been
enough
something.
justification right there. Yeah. But we don't get that. It's just, the dwarves need these rings too. And Celebrimbor's like, you know what? You're right.
Am I insane?
No, you're not insane.
Did anyone
This
catch
show
on
has
this?
rotted my. No, the show
Nope.
has rotted my brain so much that I didn't even do that.
And maybe it's because there's so little to it that you don't really want to put in the effort to think about the internal logic of the show. But I was sitting here going like, well, then why did the dwarves need them? If you're telling us the reason why the rings need to be created is to stop the fading of the elves, great. But they haven't said the dwarves are fading. Well, yeah, but they're powerful. But they don't. At no point did they say we need these rings of power because they give us powers. They just said we need these rings of power to stop the fading of the elves. That's it.
It makes
The
you wonder
power
if
is
the writers of
ancillary
the
to
shows literally wanted you, because after I think they started making these rings for the dwarves after they show like Lord Kieran or whatever, like fucking around with the fish, and they realize these rings have more power than we realized. And
Círdan, see, that's a good point, except for the fact they haven't had contact with Celebrimbor since the making.
oh yeah, no, I understand that. Like this is for the audience. They're trying to trick you as an audience member, not
But
within
Celebrimbor
the
doesn't know
internal
that.
logic. Sure, I understand that. What I'm telling you is this is what the writers are doing. They're lazy.
So they're talking to the audience and thinking that somehow the audience knows that they're powerful and give you powers, so therefore you don't have to think about that the characters know?
Yes. Like, therefore,
Because it is
obviously, dwarves want it.
It is a massive point of this show that Celebrimbor does not have any contact with Lyndon.
Yes, it
much
is.
so.
He has no idea what the hell is going on.
Not a clue. He thinks the ring saved the tree from the goo.
Yes. Sauron is literally manipulating things to prevent conversation and information being spread between the two. In Celebrimbor's mind, he made the rings and they left, and that's all he knows.
Yeah.
This seems like a very big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be a problem there, Chief. I mean, because what
Then
does
why make them for the for the men now?
well, maybe their trees have goo. All right. God, you're so
that's
critical.
That was
Jealous.
never established.
You gotta be fair.
I mean,
We don't
they
even
lost
know-
all the nice trees in the Southlands, so
Yeah.
It's because of jewelry jealousy. We made some for the
Yeah.
dwarves, and the men are going to be really upset that they're unadorned.
men are going to be
when
angry
the-
at the lack of drip. Yes.
Yes.
When the dwarves start showing off their bling, the men are going to be super jealous.
I
and
thought
they're
we
gonna
were
come to
chill.
the elves and say, "Why didn't you make some for us?" Dang it!
And I know we're dwelling on this because there's another massive problem in this episode that we're about
There's-
to get to.
there's
But
a
I thought it
huge
worth
problem.
addressing the issues with the rings at this point that we haven't talked about because literally we're so exhausted by this show. No one pointed out the fact that, wait, why on hell did the dwarves need rings?
God.
Because of the drip, I guess.
The drip.
The drip of power.
I mean, maybe they're trying to reverse justify the dwarves getting the ring because I think if we got the timeline right, then the dwarven rings, they were already making them, and then the sun got cut off to the dwarves, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't find their way out of the mountain to get the sunlight back in, right? And then they're like,
Right.
"Oh, see, now the dwarves need the rings."
They've never made the connection that the rings in
But-
any way would assist
Right.
at all in helping them get their sunlight back and guiding
Yeah, not
them
to
and
kill
digging the
Brimbor.
holes.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they're trying to say, but if they show that it does that, which they've done, then they're hoping the audience doesn't make the same conclusion that you've made, which
Think
is
about it
why
for
on
5
Earth-
minutes.
yeah.
Yes.
Why on Middle Earth did the dwarves even need these rings?
Yes.
Because the conclusion
him-
will be the dwarves need them because they couldn't get to the sunlight.
Well, lore accuracy aside, they could have at least had a moment where they go, wow, these rings are amazing. They give you powers that enhance the individual that we cannot fully understand. The dwarves are in trouble. They need this as well. It would take them like 1 or 2 lines.
Yeah.
In with the internal logic of the show, wouldn't be lore accurate or whatever, but that's fine.
Yeah.
But at no point did they do that. Celebrimbor doesn't even know they give you powers. They're just fancy rings, I guess.
Yeah.
That get rid of goo.
The goo defense. Yes. Very
But
important.
let's shove along. Anatar is having a conversation with Celebrimbor, and Anatar is basically like, the men really need rings. Celebrimbor is like, I don't trust it because of a line from a movie. So they have this bit of a sort of a face-off, and Anatar just puts his foot down and says no. And this is the we'll make 9, I guess. There's no reasoning for why we make 9. We're just gonna make 9. I'm gonna see if we don't get a line out of him. We have a conversation. Well, okay, whatever. He puts his foot down, and then Anatar goes, well, I'll just do it without you. Later, loser. And then he moves on. Now we're cut to Numenor. And here's our Pharazôn, and they're like, we can now do all the great things we've always envisioned. Because apparently we elect people because of a bird.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, so this is yet another thing that ticked me off about this particular episode. He says, "Have you ever seen this tower?" And his son says, "No, I've never seen it." And then our Pharazôn says, "You know what? You have to climb up to the top of this mountain, and only if you're like eagle-eyed can you even see this. I think the elves put it there to taunt us." I'm like, "You can't even see it."
In the lore, you wouldn't be able to. Are they talking about a tower in Valinor?
Yeah. That's what I
Basically,
thought. Yeah.
it's on the edge of heaven, and apparently the elves put it there to taunt men who can't even see the darn thing. They would only know it's there through myths and legends.
The rule of the gods is that they can only sail as far to the west as they can still see Numenor with their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, if you as far as you can sail to the west, you can barely make out perhaps shores of Valinor. That was my understanding.
Right.
This doesn't make sense, but
No,
fine.
not at all.
What it's trying to do in the lore, which is something in the lore, is to establish the jealousy that the men of Numenor have over Valinor, that they can't go there.
Yes, and I get
a
that
lot
they're
of the
trying
jealousy is the immortality with the elves.
and I get that they're trying to establish that jealousy. I get that, but at the same time, it's like it would make more sense to say, you know, that thing that we have here in Numenor, that tower, that shrine, that whatever that's here in the city that we walk past every single flippin' day. The elves put it here, and that makes me jealous because the elves can go to Valinor and we can't.
Well, and this
That
is
would make
definitely
more
supposed
sense
to be symbolic with this line. No matter how high we climb, we're never gonna
Yeah.
reach the heights that they're always going to keep us down. Like, I know what they're trying to do. It's not horrible, the symbolism. It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. It makes no sense whatsoever that they're like, oh yeah, the elves are keeping us down. And it's like, you can't even see this tower. How could that be influencing you?
Yeah.
It needed to be something in Numenor.
Well,
Something that they could look at daily and say, that gripes me.
Well, and like the logic of the scene isn't bad. Like they're talking about the
No.
insecurities the men of Numenor have, especially when they've created such a grand kingdom. And all they had to do is he's sitting there talking to his son and he goes, "Did you know that if you sail far enough west, you can almost see Valinor? It's like they're trying to keep it from us." But they had to create this line about this tower, which they didn't have to. They could just say something else and it would work.
Yeah.
It's just the tower's dumb. Like the scene isn't terrible. They're talking about the insecurities that Numenor has, which is important because in the future there are going to be problems with Numenor.
Right.
At any rate, they have this awkward conversation, and he's like, "I'll tell you about your mother, but you have to go do something for me," which is a weird.
That is,
weird.
I immediately flagged that as the most bizarre thing to say to your son. Like, I'll tell you what she thought, but you got to do stuff for me, and if you don't, well, I ain't never gonna tell you, you piece of shit. Like, what?
It's like he's blackmailing his son with information about his mother.
Yeah, bizarre.
Like, "I'll only tell you if you do a minor task for me and prove that you're good at stuff."
So odd.
Okay. Or you could just tell him to do it because he wants to please his father. You don't have to manipulate him with information about his mother.
Yeah, like what the fuck?
He was going to do it anyway, whether or not you were holding this thing over your son's head. He wants to do it.
They had
He's
established
he's your
previously that
Lappy.
he wanted information about his mother. Like, whatever.
Well, here we're to a scene where Elendil's talking to the queen and what I like to call shipping of the rings of battle.
Yes, this is another shipping.
Needs him a little bit of queen.
I've been wondering here with this scene. So we know that Elendil had two sons, Isildur and Anarion, if I remember right.
Uh-huh.
So far, as far as I know, we haven't seen his second son at all.
Well, because now she's a daughter, so.
Well, no, because it's not Anarion. I'm wondering if somehow they're going to have these two together, and that's going to be his younger son.
So
I
we can get some Browning in his line or something?
hate.
I mean, they
all
don't
of
really
this.
need it because Isildur is already.
He's a little
Diverse.
swarthy himself. Well, the shipping of the rings, which seems to be the biggest moving factor for fans of this show, is the perpetual shipping of characters. And that's what this
Awkwardly
scene...
and dumb.
Yeah, it's very dumb. But that seems to be what that scene mostly is about.
Ugh.
And they have a conversation. Did anyone care about this conversation? Anything to add?
Not
on it?
even a little.
No.
And I don't understand what she was telling him to do, if I'm honest. Like, to be chill, because then he's very
Well-
much not chill.
She thinks that somehow the vision that she saw in the Palantir that's not supposed to be producing visions, that it somehow is now not going to come to pass
Hey,
because Elendil didn't see it. He saw something else in the crystal.
I
and I-
realize this might be my own fault because I skipped the recap.
Uh-huh.
When did he touch a Palantir? Because I don't remember that in the fucking slightest.
So when they got it was in the episode with the eagle. His daughter brought it in and like dropped it, and it rolled.
Oh,
He grabbed
really?
it and got blown away from it.
Her
That's
whole
right.
rage and impetus is she has this elven thing and chucks it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we can't trust her because of racism.
that's right. I forgot he touched it then. Okay. Boy,
So
that
she
literally
thinks that-
stuck with me, huh?
She thinks that because he saw something else, that now that vision is not going to come to pass. And so she's trying to tell him he needs to stick to whatever it was that he saw so that her, vision of the destruction of Numenor is avoided.
By the way, I accidentally ended up on the still of him doing this weird, sexy look over his shoulder.
Smolder.
The smolder.
I'm just pointing that out. Anyway, we are now in this confrontational thing of remember how everybody was super into this thing and they all volunteered and the whole city was behind going to war. And now they're like, we're dismantling the army or anybody loyal to the queen, I guess.
Yeah.
And so they have to have this awkward scene of everybody turning in their stuff and everybody still
have
expressing
anybody
their
loyal to the
loyalty
queen.
to the captain. And it makes them all mad because there's divided, I guess, loyalties in this kingdom.
You can only have loyalty to Ar-Pharazôn now.
And I know we've got Aaronian here. Is it me? Like I know I say this a lot when I'm incredulous about weird moments. But she went from I'm positive girl who's gonna go into STEM fields, and suddenly she's some like shitlord girl boss who's really like annoying and awful.
Yeah, I wrote down in my notes, why are all the women in this show like stupid or assholes? Like what? This is supposed to be like a series, like this particular season specifically. Oh, we have female directors, and this is like they're kind of pushing this to be like it's a female-led show, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. And all the women are fucking awful. They're unappealing dickheads who are brash and stupid, and the only one who's even remotely not that way is impotent and feckless. Like she has no power now, and that's the queen.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, like Galadriel after 2 episodes earlier
in the season 1, but season 2 she's calmed down. Maybe it's because she's been cowed or whatever.
Right, but like Galadriel's right back where she was last season.
Yeah,
she's right there again.
Yeah,
Steve
facing the screen and
and just stupid but arrogant about it. Like oh my god!
Well, it's my contention that modern writers don't know how to write women.
No,
because they either write them flawless or they write them illogically flawed, like in unreasonable ways. And I know the argument of we need more women in these shows, and I don't have there are strong female characters in the lore in Numenor that they're writing inaccurately. But I don't have a problem with these characters being in it, but they're so horribly literally the purpose of this is so that they're girl characters that women can relate to. Like this is literally the stated goal of placing these sorts of characters in there because she doesn't exist. She's not real.
Yeah.
Right.
But as a woman, Silver, do you feel represented? Is it important to see yourself in this show? Do you lack the capacity to relate to men because they have peni?
All the women characters in this, I definitely cannot relate to. It's like you're saying, the way they're written, they can't write women well.
No.
Women aren't like whatever her name is they're doing
Eodian or something like that.
Yeah, like throughout so far season 2, whenever we see her, she's kind of always in her dad's face, like, yeah, listen to me.
That's an interesting voice.
The change in her character doesn't make sense either.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't, because she was
they don't explain the
father's
change.
rules and everything in the first season, and then suddenly met one guy's son and is like, all right, I'm a rebel.
They think they explained it by everyone thinking that Isildur is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think that explains it, but it's not very well.
They needed to show her much more broken up and disturbed by what happened.
Yeah.
To explain the sudden turn.
Yeah. Instead of channeling it into anger, it seems like.
Well, we got no emotional. Like, I'm not saying you need to have anybody but cry, but it seems like sadness and crying doesn't exist in Rings of Power.
No,
No.
no.
It's like
They
they
show
don't have
vulnerable
confidence that the
character
actors
with-
can cry and show sadness.
I mean, they
They
showed a
don't have a
little
tear
bit
stick.
once.
Oh, where was that?
And that was that episode where they burned the body of the healer lady.
Oh.
But then
Yeah.
Theo was immediately angry with him. So
Yeah. You know, I forget the elf and how amazing his blank facial expressions
Oh.
are.
listen, he was in deep throes of sadness. Couldn't you tell?
That actor's got a lot of subtle facial movements when how he.
It's almost like he's meant to mog a runway, and that's all he can do. But
And
whatever.
this is literally the whole impetus of her character. My brother is dead because Muriel peeped into an elf stone because of my racism.
Yeah. The thing is that you would
Her
think
bigotry.
that because of the way Elendil is, and that he reveres the old ways, he would have brought up his children to do the same thing. And so Aarion here would be glad that the queen was getting counsel from the Elfstone, rather than he's getting it from this cursed object. We
Well,
shouldn't trust her.
And rebellious children are a thing, but they could have
True.
at least explained, like, have her express her thoughts at some point. Why the
Yeah.
turnaround all of a sudden? Instead of this weird hissy fit where she's like, look, that stupid bint of a queen has this elf thing, and she chucks it. And it's like, okay, that's supposed to explain why we're upset, I guess? Or lest we forget, her brother volunteered, believed in the cause, was told no, tried to sneak onto the ship to go anyway, still told no, and eventually his father relented to let him take care of the horses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really difficult to get really butthurt about the death of somebody who did it willingly.
Yeah.
A sadness, sure.
Oh, certainly.
Or maybe
it's not like-
self-blame. You didn't do enough to stop it.
Sure.
But
But
he did
yeah,
what
it's
he
not like
wanted.
he was drafted. You know,
No.
there's no conscription in Numenor.
He wanted to do it so bad, he snuck on the ship.
Yeah.
And then watched a guy try to sabotage it and burn down the shit. There's all these problems with that. Anyway, we have this confrontation. He's like, oh, he's doing the over-the-shoulder look again. Look at
No.
That
This
is
guy's
insight.
angry.
that. Anyway, it's basically like the I don't like you anymore, Dad, and you're wrong, daughter, or whatever. And then it's like, I'm really in charge, but I'm upset about it because no one will listen to me, and they're still loyal to the queen, even though I'm forcing them not to be. This is a bit of a conflict, an internal conflict within the island of Numenor, the kingdom of Numenor. Which I mean, the conflict is fine. It's
Yeah.
necessary for the story, and the scene is okay. It makes her seem exaggeratingly douchey, but
Yeah.
Out of
the-
nowhere.
the scene overall feels necessary. And here's Farazan, who they made such a big deal that the queen touched this thing. He's like, I'm gonna touch it. So wouldn't he be subject to the same problems that the queen has, or distrust?
Yes, but he's doing it in secret. Nobody knows.
Well, they're working on the stone, and we cut to our boy King Gilgalad, who's one of the greatest of the elves ever, and seems like a passive participant in events that occur. Well, and there's this weird discussion. Did anyone be slightly confused about this, where they're like, Sauron or the orcs are heading for Region. We need to go stop them. And he's like, no? Because
Well,
Mordor? I
no.
guess?
Yeah.
That's later. She's
Okay,
just
am I ahead
saying
of
we need to
myself?
not wait for, like why are we waiting? Because they're not going to go to Eregion. We know
You're
that
right.
they're in Mordor.
They don't know that the orcs are coming yet. That hasn't
it's-
happened.
I'm mad
that's-
at myself. My fault.
Well, because it comes up later though, and
Yeah.
then it makes it even more confusing to me. But
But yeah, he's sitting there, and she's telling him that they need to go invade Mordor to destroy the orcs, and he's like, no.
Well, and it seems like his decision making is ring motivated,
Yeah,
which is interesting. Maybe Sauron can manipulate them through the lesser rings, which I never understood as being established. But all right.
the rings do whatever you need them to do in the moment.
They're what do you call that? The weird object that can do whatever you want it to do.
Oh,
MacGuffin.
like a MacGuffin?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, now they're talking, and the person, and they even at least address it, but she really pushed for this ring thing, and she's like, I don't trust it. We shouldn't be doing the ring thing. And he's like, this was your idea. There's a lot of people changing their minds suddenly without justification in this show.
like I mentioned earlier, exactly. It's like,
He
wait,
found the holes and he didn't require our help. I don't like it.
yeah,
But and my confusion is they've given no indication as to why there would be mistrust. He's not acting weird yet. He's not skeeving or doing something. He's not out of personality. She just goes, oh, immediately he found the holes that we need to make. I don't like it.
yeah, it's very petty. It's like he's stealing our job with this ring.
But I think the show wants us to think her wise and forethought, like foresight into this is a bad idea, but the show's given her no indication as to why she would think that. Besides, it's replacing my job, I guess.
Hmm.
Do you remember the scene earlier where after they were chanting like "Oh, Khazad-dûn" or whatever, and it did the slow pan to her and the rest of the rock singers,
Uh-huh.
and they all look like, "Oh, we're about to be fired." Yeah, watching that scene for some strange reason, the first thought that came to my mind is like, "Hey, look, it's it's the Roman Catholic Church losing hold over the monarchy in England." And
I'll
their
make my own.
expressions are just, oh,
I'll make my own church with blackjack and hookers.
yeah. I was like, look, they're losing hold.
Apparently we get a shopping scene for a rock. Sweet. And they're shopping, and clearly they're very capable of shaping rocks. It's like they went to like a rock store and bought geodes.
Oh, yeah.
But they're clearly capable of shaping rocks. Not precious stones, mind you.
No, that's a bridge too far. That's hard.
But they haggle over this rock. And this weird scene I think they're supposed to think is comedic is she drops the rock
Yeah.
and it rolls what I assume 10 feet from the market, and she discovers a previously undiscovered room right next to the market. That I guess nobody knows about.
Yeah, kids don't go looking around and stuff when they're bored. That's for sure.
How
When
awful is
mom's
this?
shopping.
It's right
It's
next
really
to the busiest place in Khazad-dûm.
She starts singing, goes, "Oh, there you are." It's like, it's right in front of you.
Well, that's right. She tries to figure out where the rock is. She starts to belt and looks down, and it's right there. So she had to sing to it. But the impetus
was. I think it fell in the water, and the water like moved away.
I don't recall that. As I recall, she sings and the resonance shakes the water, and her singing wakes up perhaps an evil monster who also shakes the water in his grumble response. This is sort of what I got out of it.
It's a good thing markets are not loud or raucous places. Oh, wait.
Well, and it's like they were trying to write a scene where we get this like, ooh, I bet that's the Balrog,
Yeah, yeah.
but they wrote it in such a way where you're like, wait, the market's right there. What do you mean she dropped, like, she couldn't have like been torn about what's happening with the ring and conflicted about her feelings and go wandering and came upon this place. She had to drop a rock and it rolled 5 feet away from the market into a previously, I guess, undiscovered pond in the back of this market, even though it's right there.
Did anybody else notice that the crystal that she picks up, it has a huge chunk out of one side?
Well, it's a geode. It's just like
Right.
rounded. Yeah.
Right. But did you notice that huge chunk missing?
I did.
I
And
see,
did
it's right
anybody
here.
else think? Did anybody else think? Why would that have rolled, and not just fallen on that one side and stopped?
because the scene had to happen, Jason. Hello.
And
Hello.
How else
then
would she discover the Balrog and or Watcher?
she
Or
drops
whatever,
it
yeah.
in the market, and it rolls down. It's almost like it rolls down a set of stairs.
Yeah.
It rolls into this cavern with the lake, and it's perfectly intact, no scratches, nothing. And she gets scared and drops it, and it shatters.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you
No,
know,
remarkably
after it had already
durable when
dropped
it
from
needs to
her,
be.
like from her waist to begin with.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know.
didn't
Maybe I
shatter.
was just more bothered by how she accidentally happens upon this secret little room next to the busiest place in the entire kingdom.
Oh, do you know what I thought it was going to be? But this is also about equally as dumb. I legit thought they were going to show the sealed up hole where they were mining the mithril. Remember in the last season?
Oh yeah.
I legit thought she was going to find that, and I was like, "Oh my god!" But it wasn't. However, this is almost. I mean, this really is just as dumb. This is really stupid.
To be fair, Jason, there might be a flaw in your theory. Even though
Okay.
there is an awkward hole on one side, it could have just rolled only on the smooth sides because round objects are known to be very predictable in their direction that they roll.
Yeah, and not balanced funny because it has a hole in it. And
Mm-hmm. See?
Mhm.
Debunked. Jason
Myth
busted. Shamed. Myth busted.
nerd.
Anyway, establishes shot outside. It's
this we actually did in the market there talk about the changes that are coming over.
Yeah,
King
the
Buren
ring
III.
tax.
Yeah,
yeah. So they're giving these rings for free, and immediately the king's like, "I'll give them to the other kingdoms, but you have to give me 50% of your stuff."
Yeah. By the way, does this not seem like something that maybe old Celebrimbor would handle himself rather than just go, "Yeah, anyway, you just divvy them up. However, whatever."
Now,
This feels really
that-
weird.
it's really awkward, but if they're leaning on the idea that these rings corrupt or making him more greedy, then I suppose this makes sense. But this is greedy to an extreme.
Oh my god, it's hilarious.
Yes.
I mean, this is like propaganda from a certain mustached man. Like, this is hilariously greedy.
well, not only that, but we're talking about the rings here, and we know that the rings corrupt and all that stuff, right? Or at least it's like they're trying to bring that in here. Don't you think it would be better if the corruption didn't take place until Sauron was ready for it?
Well,
Oh, you mean so
or-
like people weren't immediately suspicious of these rings that
Yeah,
suddenly
it's
made
like-
this longtime king a horrible, greedy dickhead?
yeah. It's like we need to get these rings in place, and then when I'm ready to put my master plan into effect, that's when the corruption starts. That's when people, at this point,
Well,
there should be
everybody
no
would miss-
suspicion of the rings.
Well, everybody would mistrust them immediately if this is how they affected people.
What,
Not
the
to
snake
exactly.
oil salesman pitch didn't work for you? What do you mean? That
Well-
didn't put you at ease?
Well, not to mention the fact that the one ring in Lord of the Rings that literally has the will and part of Sauron within it does not act as fast on the hobbits as this One Ring has on this dwarf almost immediately.
Yeah.
Immediately, he's like, "Oh, he's shit worthy. He's really corrupt
evil.
and well." And it's
Do
like,
you know why?
Why?
Well, the special sauce for the mix on this one was old Sauron hocked a loogie in the metal. That's why. In the molten metal.
Well,
There you go.
I'm just saying you could have been more subtle, slowly. It's like they
Yes,
could have sold the
exactly.
story where these rings are amazing. Look at all the benefits, and then slowly we're seeing that maybe they're not everything we thought they are. That we're seeing a slow change in people, but the
this
change is
comes-
so immediate that you're like, and it's like, well, we don't have enough time. This show is now literally longer than the Lord of the Rings combined
Yes.
extended edition. You have all the time in the world to express this.
Well, this
The
goes
slow
back to what I
corruption
said
of the
earlier.
rings.
How, like, the last couple episodes, certainly 2, probably 3, were boring as shit.
And
I mean,
they
they were-
rushed elements.
And then this episode, they just quickly patch it all together, quick, right now. And it's like, you can slow burn this a little bit better. I don't. God damn, they just waste time on stuff that doesn't matter and then rush everything else.
But he's talking to these people about all the power that they will get, that these rings are awesome. And these aren't the kings. He says, if you want these, the kings have to come to me to get it themselves, not some emissaries.
I mean, it
Just
does
as
kind
an
of make sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
The,
in the show.
the fact that they're important, and it's like, no, I need to hand these over directly to the kings.
Yep.
But the fact that he's like, it comes with a price.
Yeah,
That's
you wouldn't
where
tell
they're-
that to the
that's where they're
emissaries.
screwing up.
You spring that on the guy when he's in the room with you. That's when you do it.
Yeah.
I like how the light of the sun no longer rules over the doors, but this guy it super does. This black dwarf in the corner. You know,
No, it doesn't. He can't be sunburned anymore.
well,
You Yakubian ape,
I'm sorry.
Caucasoid.
Well, I'm just saying melanin is an affectation of a biological, like, your biology is changing your skin tone in order to protect you against the sun's rays. He's
Well, it
not
is funny
actually a
that in
different
real life-
species or anything.
If a heavily melanated person moves to, say, like Sweden or Norway or even Britain, they have to take vitamin D,
Yeah,
and we're
'cause
just
they
going to
can't get
be all right with
sunlight.
black dwarfs.
Yeah,
like-
because they block it out.
Yeah, oh, okay. I don't know.
Well,
Like-
and just by assumption would be they have a kingdom that lives in the sun more. That's where this guy
Yeah.
comes from. They're not
Yeah.
underground dwarves. They're from
Maybe
other
they're
places.
maybe they're pit miners. You know what I mean? Maybe they're like doing Kennecott mine of Middle Earth.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Also in the south, they're the southern relations. They're
Yes.
not the northern dwarves.
A little bit closer to Rune, maybe.
Yeah.
Whereas these very light-skinned ones, if they lived in his kingdom, they'd have to put on a lot of sunscreen because that
Oh,
would be a
look,
problem.
there's so maybe they have a ring for that. Magical that blocks out the evil goo sun rays.
Yeah.
The SPF 3000 ring.
Yeah, the SPF 75 ring.
Well, he's selling these rings hard as being super awesome.
Oh yeah.
Power over the earth. We're gonna do this, and he's like, "There's gold right beneath us," and then they just show gold, I guess.
Yeah.
But it looks like they're working on it, so I'm a little confused as to what he's describing here. But okay. He's like, "There's gold you don't know about, but you do know about it. It's right here."
There's gold in them there hills.
Well, not only do they know about it, the king forbid mining it.
Yes, and he
Well-
suddenly changed his mind. I get it.
Yeah, at least mining past a certain depth.
Right.
Yeah. He was like, who said we shouldn't do that? And Narvi's like, you did.
Well, and
Well,
here's
strike it
the-
immediately.
Well, here's another big issue with time and space. He had this gathering of dwarves from across the 7 dwarven kingdoms. How did they get here so fast? How much time has passed? In this episode
knows?
alone, how much time
3
has
or
passed?
4 wee month years.
We month years, yeah.
We month year, standard measurement of time in Middle Earth. Especially in the flat Earth era.
Because of the great distances that some of these places would have had to cross, it would have taken way more than just a minute.
maybe they have embassies in Kazakhstan.
This is another problem with the issue of time and space. Some side stories happen almost what feels like across months or years. And then other side stories seems like days or weeks.
Yeah, instantaneously. even.
Instantaneously. And then I start to ask, is this moving faster than the moments in Eregion or the moments with the Harfoots, which are going on in Rune? Like, what's happening?
It all implies that it's happening simultaneously,
Yes, it does.
which means that these people are teleporting around somehow.
They say George R. R. Martin, like one of the reasons maybe he's having trouble finishing his books is there's a lot of threads that he has to tie together, and he probably won't be able to without actually fucking up the timeline. Do you know how you get around that?
Huh.
Fuck it, just ignore it. We're just maybe it's all happening right now. Maybe it's all happening within a few days of each other. Maybe this is happening years ahead or years behind. Who cares? Whatever. Throw it on the screen. It's fine.
Well, and I guarantee you the response to this that people are going to have is, why are you being so nitpicky? It's not that big a deal. Stop caring about it so much. You're being awful and nitpicky. Why do you care? And it's like, but these are weird logical issues that weren't issues with Lord of the Rings, really. They're issues with
Nope.
the show.
Very much so.
And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
turn your head off or turn your brain off and whatever. It's like, but I care about the lore and I want that to make
Well-
sense.
Well, when I turn my brain off, this is just boring.
Well, in Lord of the Rings, like in Fellowship specifically, with a few scenes going from you were able to understand that it's been decades that have passed from when Gandalf leaves the Shire, investigates the ring, and then comes back to Frodo and tells him that the ring is really important and dangerous. Like,
Yeah.
they're able to get that across to you as an audience with just a few scenes.
I think it's supposed to be
This-
30 years in the book.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah,
a long
it was a long time.
Whereas this show, across a few scenes, leaves you completely baffled as to when or where something is happening. And I'm not saying it's easy, because hell, how would I know? I ain't never made a show, but like, maybe a few less threads, a few less irons in the fire.
Yeah, they're trying to juggle too many things.
Well, Game of Thrones did it, so we must as well.
And Game of Thrones failed.
In the end, it's super dead.
Yeah, they
Took them a
spent
few
all this
seasons.
time getting the distance and the stuff accurately, and by the later seasons, it felt like characters were teleporting across continents.
It seems like there may be a problem with this style of storytelling.
Yeah.
I like Ross's idea that the other dwarven kingdoms had embassies in Moria.
Well, if that's the case, then they should have just been like, call the ambassadors,
All the
from
ambassadors.
the kingdom. Yes,
Yeah,
easy.
yeah. With a simple line, one line, you would have assuaged the minds of us, the viewers.
Well, anyway, he changes his mind, as Jason pointed out, to dig deeper, and his son comes in, and he's like, "This is a bad idea." And Disa heard some rumbling.
Yeah.
Let's stop everything we're doing, cancel whatever's going on, because my wife heard something, and she's. At this point, it's the level of gossip. The immediate reaction I had to this. Let's say, we got word that there might be something evil, or something grumbly, or there might be something down there. Okay. Instead of immediately, let's all take policy actions to change things based upon the word of one person who heard it. Instead, maybe what you should have done is being like, oh, well, let's investigate.
Let's go see what it is, so we can more
Yeah.
accurately describe what the problem is.
As opposed to the mountain rumbled, and my wife is
Something
super
also made
trustworthy.
vibrations.
Right. Am I wrong?
No, you're
I mean-
100% right. Especially where her crew of stone singers or whatever the hell they're called have just been shown to have failed.
Yeah.
So even if the king was in his right mind, he'd be like, well, I mean, he's either incredulous because of their failure or incredulous because, like, oh, well, they're just jealous.
Look, I'll look into it. Or whatever.
Yeah. But no, just based on her word, don't take any homies down there and see what's going on. None of that.
Jason, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it is implied that there is a lot of trust that the dwarves put into the stone singers.
Yeah, I agree.
And
They're almost priestesses of sorts.
yeah, it seems to me that if Disa, whom King Durin III has trusted in the past,
Mhm.
if he, Durin comes in, his son comes in and says, "Look, my wife heard something, and it's something ancient and evil that's down there." The least the king could do is say, "You know what? Let's investigate it." Even if he doesn't believe, even if he thinks that there's nothing wrong, but he totally could say, "You know what? It bears looking into."
Well-
he could say, I doubt there's anything down there, but I'll send somebody to look.
This is almost meta thinking in terms of the
Yes.
show.
It is,
Because
yes.
we're supposed to think, don't trust this ring, right?
Right.
But if you step back from what the show is sort of trying to get us to think, and think about what's actually been presented, the king gets a ring in a desperate time when they don't have sunlight to grow their crops. And he even walks up to a wall where they're like, don't dig there. That's a retaining wall. It's a bad idea. He digs there and immediately gets sunlight. So it seems like the ring is immediately helping guide him as a king
Yes.
to really good decisions, to the point where now he can even tell you where seams of rare minerals are because he has a foresight that nobody else has. There's been no indication that the possession of this ring has given him bad decision making.
No,
But
none whatsoever.
because his wife heard rumblings of something that might be down there, we need to cancel all decision making. We need to stop despite the fact that the show is telling us that ring has been giving them great ideas from the inception of him having it. At no point did the ring go like, oh, he's doing stuff and this is a bad idea. Every single decision he's made having that ring has been amazing. And they're like, stop every decision making we're doing. I don't trust it. Why? The show is saying that the ring is amazing. Why would we stop digging where we previously were hesitant to dig? Why would we listen
Right.
to? Oh, we heard a rumbling. Okay, we'll look into it. I don't. It's failing to get across what it wants us to think
Mhm.
with how it's
Being
presenting itself.
It's not really even foreshadowing.
No, it should.
It's just immediately saying, well, you all know that the ring is bad. And so you all know, the audience, not the people in the show. The people in the show are like, ooh, this ring is bad. And there's no reason for them to think that the ring is bad, like you said. But it's just so poorly written here.
Well, and what they could have done
We know
is
that the rings are bad.
well, they could have
but
given
they
us a
shouldn't.
whole season. You're right. We know that because they're meta doing this. They know
Yes.
the audience knows, but at no point have they presented that these are bad to anyone else in the show.
No,
Despite
none
the fact that
whatsoever.
Elrond's like, I don't trust it. Or Deesa's like, I don't trust it because it took my job. And as an aside, what they should have done, and Jason might agree with me on this, is if they gave us a whole season of these rings being amazing.
Yes.
How awesome. Like, look at all this wealth we're generating. Our fortunes have turned around. and at the very end of the season, it's almost like a cat's paw. The kingdom suddenly becomes amazing and great. Balrog shows up and murders everybody. Everything's going amazing for this other kingdom. Cat's paw at the end. What we thought we were getting eventually turns to ruin.
Yes.
That would have been an interesting way to present these. We think these rings are giving us everything we want, but they're not. But they're not clever enough to do that. They're literally leaning on the idea of the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, where it's like he has it and he's different and it's manipulating his mind. And it's like, it wouldn't be that obvious. It would be so much more subtle. And but because then you could have sold the story of how amazing the rings are, and then it all comes crashing down.
Like why somebody would fall for it, other than just outright like evil manipulation to your soul.
Yes, and why
like
anybody
why
would
wouldn't you
distrust them? Like it does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Anyway, he's like, don't trust the ring. He's like, but here's the stupid thing. It was Deese's idea, and he sold it to his dad, and now he's like, don't though. And the dad's like, everything's amazing and it's working out, but don't though.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Has there been any indication you're more greedy than you've ever been? All right. Is it because of the 50% tax on the other kingdoms?
This is another thing. Just to mention briefly, he says that he can see everything in the mountain.
Yeah, he has ball hacks.
Yeah,
why can't he see the Balrog?
Because they don't want him to, because MacGuffin.
It's not Or. So
it's just very imprecise about what these rings do, what they're granting them. Are they directly controlled from Sauron? Is he manipulating them? Because the actual reason for the One Ring was to control the others, so he wouldn't have the capacity to control the others.
Not yet, which means that there's no reason for the rings to be corrupting these people yet.
No, there isn't. The best description I could have in the lore as to what the rings do, because the power is so imprecise, Tolkien really didn't describe it, is that the rings enhance the characteristics of the individual that have it, the general rings, despite the fact some of the elven rings have their own little powers. So if a dwarf is greedy, it makes him more so, but that doesn't necessarily mean it makes them greedy. It just enhances aspects of who the person is. At any rate, they're having this conversation. Something weird happens. We get floaty tools, and everyone's freaking out. I thought maybe there was a gravity issue in this workshop.
Yeah, same here.
And they're working out this ring.
Or suddenly one of the elves had magnetized themselves.
Yeah, something. And stuff is moving around weird and confusingly. And he ends up grabbing it and stopping it, and immediately knew where her hand was, despite being invisible, and pulls the ring off, and she was invisible!
Oh my god.
Which at no point was there any indication that any of the other rings made people invisible at all.
Yeah.
By the way,
it's a new thing they're trying.
I hate bringing this up as a lore issue. Invisibility was an aspect alone of the One Ring.
Yeah, it almost seems like it might be a little too powerful to give to your enemies, I just thought.
And apparently her going into the Wraith world made her go insane and tried to kill people with a hammer.
Yeah.
Because when a hobbit put it on, he didn't go insane and try and kill people with a hammer that looked ghostly. She did, though. Anyway, they're really suspicious about what happened. She describes seeing a shrouded figure in mist and darkness, and first she thought the figure was the Forge, but it was wreathed in flames and reeking of death. And it's like,
we know who that is.
I wonder.
And it's like when she's in there, she could see where these people are. she doesn't know that the breathing fire flame death person is right there. She taking it off immediately loses the ability to tell which person that was.
She couldn't remember where he was standing. All right, listen, it's hard.
Well, he reassures her by being creepy.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, like
really
your hair
strange.
looks like
In this
The
light,
baby
you look like
Galadriel.
Galadriel.
Well, basically, the easiest way to manipulate a girl is to tell them they look like Galadriel. She's like, "Oh, really?" and then fans herself.
Yeah, or like make her jealous or something. It's super strange.
you look
You're-
like my ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
You're hot like the famous hot girl.
Eh.
Well, she doesn't have perpetual stink face, so I would go for her.
I would definitely go for her over stink face, douche face.
But this sparks a massive conversation, which is, oh my gosh, this episode is dragging, which is another giant issue.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Keep going.
Um,
Oh, and then
So
during
he's-
the 4th, suddenly he's here.
yeah, he appears
A week, maybe, I don't know.
in
Whatever.
Eregion. Regardless, there's something wrong with the rings, perhaps.
Maybe.
And they don't know why. And he shows up and he's like, he's colder, quicker to anger. They have not indicated this in the show.
Really,
As
he
far as
kind
we
of
can
seems
tell,
the
the
same
rings are-
obstinate dickhead he was when he was
Yeah.
mad at his son.
Yeah,
No, you can't get Mithril.
you
Stop
have
it.
to show. You have to show us this. You can't just say he's colder and quicker to anger. Show, don't tell. Show us this change in personality, please. Now, greed is not his way. It never has been, and he's greedier now. And it's possible the ring is corrupting him, and he's like, "That's completely impossible." Even though we don't know what these rings do or what they're for, we just make them.
Or why I even made them.
Yes. And he's defending them like that's not what they do, and it's like you don't know what they do.
I super do. Shut up. All right.
Oh, and this is where he flirts with her and says, "You look like my ex-girlfriend."
Oh my god.
Really? Oh. But he reassures her in an awkward, creepy way. He should be so much more charming.
Yes.
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 He seems evil the way he acts. Like, you know what they do? You know what you should do? You make a character that's very charming, and then when the other person turns away, they get a little evil glint in their eye.
Yes.
Yep.
That's how you do it.
They-
100%.
They do that a couple times, but they do it poorly.
Because if I was hanging out with this guy, I wouldn't trust him.
Hell no.
It's like, oh,
What are
you
you,
seem creepy,
insane?
bro. Well, this really stupid scene where they're having a ceremony at the oldest temple to the Valar. And they're having a very quiet ceremony where they're putting little
Seashells
flames
with
into
candles.
the water.
I'm impressed they got them to float, if I'm honest.
Yeah, they're usually not balanced very well, them seashells.
No.
And he shows up in the middle of their ceremony for remembering the dead and says, "We're going to burn this place to the ground. Get out." Like, look, if you're the new king in town and there are people who disagree with you and are still loyal to the queen and whatnot, perhaps causing confrontation is not the most tactful way of doing things. And the wisest decision you could have made is to wait for the funeral to be over and then tear
Yeah.
down the building, not in the middle of people mourning their family members who were dead.
Well, this is one of the questions I had in my notes. Like where I said, why are these people acting like such raging assholes? How is this the clever Farazan's way of doing this? Like, unless the problem is they haven't really shown it, at least in this episode. Maybe in the next one they will. But like, give me a scene where like people question like, but isn't this aggressiveness like a little too much? He's like, no, trust me, I know. Like, this is all. I have a plan. I have an idea. Something, but the way this looks, it's just like, yeah, we're gonna be assholes to you anyway, just because we can. And I will grant them. Maybe we'll see Farazan's great plan here in an episode or two.
Well, they explain that they're trying to put an aqueduct here, which is not where you would put an aqueduct.
Well, it's a lie. I mean, that's a anyway. Eminent domain, dickhead. We're burning this to the ground.
Well, and maybe the point is to take away their ability to worship the Valar because he's got a butthurt feeling about the Valar. They alluded to it earlier in the episode with the tower. Fine. Mm-hmm. Don't give them a martyr complex to re-entrench themselves into the religion by doing this in the middle of a ceremony. Wait until they're gone.
Maybe wait till, exactly.
And then they
Maybe
show
wait
up in
till
the
it's
place's
just the
rubble.
priest hanging out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Not
and
everyone in the mourners.
And I suppose the only explanation is his son wants to prove himself and is being really poor about the decision making.
Yep. This is to make us. This whole scene here is to make us hate him.
Yeah, yes. For sure.
And
they're doing a good job.
Evil.
Yeah.
There's no subtle. He is like, I'm the skeeviest evil guy around. Not only am I evil, I'm very cowardly.
Yeah, and I squeal like a little girl when he breaks my shoulder later.
This is an exaggerated evil, hilarious in its delivery. And they have this stupid confrontation over, well, just let us have the little thing, and he's like, whatever, I'm gonna break it. It's like, okay, this is gonna make everything better.
This is such a his evil is so petty right here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. They go, let us take this precious thing to us. Immediately, I turned to my mom and I was like, he's going to break that. Like, they don't show us that this is the Chekhov's gun. It's like they don't show us it without it being used in some way. It's like, hey, everybody, here's this really important thing that I love a lot. Oh, so that they're going to break it? Because he just told us how important it is.
Yep.
That's what the show's going to do. They're going to break it. And he super did. Anyway, they get really upset because he's making just consistently poor decisions and non-diplomatic ways in dealing with this situation. And young upstart who became a lieutenant solely based upon the fact he slightly poked Galadriel, if you remember.
Yep.
Please don't remind me.
Yeah, this fight scene, he outweighs this guy by a considerable margin. He's also considerably taller than him as well. And they're trying to make me believe that he overpowers him and forces his head underwater.
Yeah,
I had questions like that as well.
Well, and my other issue is this, because it felt like a hold me back, bro moment when Elendil should be one of the greatest warriors of Numenor. He's supposed to be like 8 feet tall and he could literally thrash everyone in this room, and there's one guy kind of holding him back. But yeah, he tries to drown this guy, and then he overpowers him, and he cries like a little girl, and is really upset, and then he's gonna kill him, and he's like, I'm better than you, I'm not gonna. And the moment everybody predicted, before it happened, he turns his back on him and he stabs him in the back.
I was hoping, I knew he wouldn't, but I was hoping he'd throw it in the water, but
that would have been a smart decision. Instead of turn your back on the guy that just tried to drown you.
Yeah. Who is known to be a feckless coward.
Yes.
Did anybody else care
about this character? No. It's important to Elendil because of his connection with this soldier who was friends with his son, that he's known him since he was young. This is important to Elendil's character, his death, and also is probably going to affect his daughter, who was friends with him as well, since they were children. So there is a degree of importance, at least to the development of other characters.
I shouldn't have said, did anybody else care? What I should have said is, did any of us care? Because
this character dies, no, but it'll have an effect on others.
Yeah. I had no investment in this character at all. I mean, yeah, the guy is a total douche for stabbing him in the back and everything. And like I said, this whole scene was put in here to make us hate this guy. And he is a skeevy little rat, but yeah, I don't care.
Well, I don't think the whole scene is even just directly us supposed to hate this guy, because we already do. I think this is supposed to spark like massive conflict in the city.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is. You're right.
His death
The
is
gloves
supposed to
are
be
off.
a big catalyst.
Mhm.
My guess would be this: he's supposed to be a big catalyst for conflict. Maybe the daughter second guesses her decision making. Like, this probably will have a huge effect on the city itself. We already hate the son. Like, we didn't need more
That's true.
incentive. But I mean, in that purpose, it's probably going to serve the story reasonably well. For help perpetuate what is eventually going to be a conflict between the king's men and the queen's men, or whatever.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. The age-old conflict, absolutely.
Yeah. At any rate, Guy dies, and we get our conversation. This is the biggest problem with the episode. This. And I'd hate to have to drag this
Yes.
out into a perpetual conversation. So they're talking, and they have this sort of idea that there perhaps is actually a problem with the Dwarven rings. And the problem with the Dwarven rings is because when we made the rings, they were done in deceit, and we put that deceit into the rings by their construction. And the deceit essentially being that Celebrimbor lied to Gilgalad that we shut down the forge and we're not making anything else. Because Celebrimbor felt smugly that we should make more. We should make more rings. So they made more, and he essentially lied to Gilgalad that they weren't gonna. And that deceit has corrupted the rings that are made after that because they were put into their creation. In the internal logic of the show, makes sense. Perfectly fine. Interesting. It's the will and personality and negative feelings of the creators are inserted into the creation. You with me so far?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. That's how that works. So then the conclusion is, we need to tell the truth to fix our problem and admit what we did. And he goes, no, we can't. I guess he doesn't want consequences for the line. But in the internal logic of the show, that doesn't look, he could tell the truth, but the deceit and corruption of the Dwarven rings already exists.
Yep.
You can't undo that by telling the truth. They're in the rings. So now,
You have to unmake and then remake the rings.
in the internal logic of the show, it now doesn't make sense. Because in the internal logic of the show, if they put this corruption into the rings, then telling the truth wouldn't fix the Dwarven rings. They would have to make more or destroy the other ones. It doesn't fix it. Am I insane?
The show may be making you insane, but
Well,
you're
right,
not
but
there yet.
they established a logic and then they abandon it within moments.
Oh, yes.
And then the
Well, not
conclusion
only-
is, I can't tell the truth. Let's double down and do the human rings anyway. And his
Yeah.
explanation is, we must face the maelstrom. It's like our conclusion is to tell the truth or face the maelstrom. And it's like, but you said if there's deceit and corruption in your soul, it's put into the rings. Doubling down doesn't fix that problem.
Right. Somehow making more rings with deceit and corruption will cancel out the deceit and corruption in the rings that have already been made.
We gotta try making the rings a little harder.
But you see my point. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
no, you're
I'm with you.
you're totally correct.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, I'm with you. So this is what's gone wrong with the rings. Well, let's tell the truth. Well, that's not going to fix the ones we already made. Well, then let's double down. But that also doesn't fix the problem that you lied.
Nope.
They established a lore and logic that works within the realm of the show, and then completely abandoned that within moments of establishing it. It's like, okay, I'm with you. This is how it works. Okay, now wait a minute. That's not how it works. You just said this is how it works. I seem to be more upset about this than the rest of you.
Dude, by this point, like this episode, like it because they'd already hinted at this earlier, like with the whole like how many should, like, why 9 thing. Well, the power of 3 or something. It's like, so why 7 with the other? Like, no, this show refuses to have logic cross between one plot point to another. It will not do it. And so they're just trying to come up with some exciting thing of why we need to make more rings to convince Celebrimbor to do it. Like, it's so bizarre. The manipulation, by the way, they're trying to cram all the manipulation into one episode, apparently.
Yeah.
It's asinine. It's baffling. God forbid you try and do a slow burn. It's just so bizarre. I mean, within the first couple sentences of this, I was just like, what? I was completely lost.
Well, and to remind you of things that just happened, they said we cannot make the human rings because we can't trust men because men are weak and easily corrupted. Therefore, double down on the corrupting rings and make them harder for the already corruptible men.
Yeah, we just got to do it harder.
But isn't that
That will balance out the dwarf rings? Don't you get it?
Like I said, one corruption cancels out the other corruption.
Yeah, it's a double negative. Come on now.
Yeah.
But
Yes, you're right. This is stupid.
Okay, well, thank you.
No, it is very stupid. But it's like,
My problem with the whole rings thing comes a little bit later.
well, I mean, to just demonstrate to maybe the casual viewer how stupid this fucking show is. Remember how the last season orcs died like vampires when the sun touched them? Well, anyway, here they are walking like just nonchalantly to fucking Erebor or whatever, and it's just kind of cloudy. What?
Well,
It was cloudy for the orcs.
They establish lore and they abandon it
Immediately.
It's like they forget what they've already established.
It's the same problem with the very first episode of this season, where it had been established in the previous season that it seemed like Sauron had been taking years, perhaps centuries, trying to find this power over flesh, and he was killing and torturing orcs to get it and all this stuff. Well, apparently that he just mentioned he had a bad speech where he mentioned that orcs were going to die.
He gooed, and then like almost 5 minutes after being goo, he picks up the pouch and gets on a boat and gets found by Galadriel.
Yep.
For like a 1,000 years, he was goo.
But you know, even though Adar had said in the previous season that he had rescued the orcs from this bastard Sauron and the horrible things he was doing, horrible things. The man made a bad speech. Apparently, that's really offensive to the orcs. They really didn't like that. Like, it's just
Some of you may die.
Some of you
had
will
an
die.
orc in the background going, "This isn't inspiring."
I do not feel inspired, and then he comes up and just tries to shank him as he says it.
Sauron just like, welcome to my TED Talk.
I mean, honestly, like it just seemed like it should have like that logo behind him. And he has like the little over the ear mic, the little that's like flesh colored
Uh-huh.
up to his mouth, like that one.
He constantly is pressing like his fingertips together as he's walking around.
Oh,
He has
yeah.
a turtleneck and he paces back
Turtleneck.
and forth.
He is Steve Jobs.
He just turns into Steve Jobs for this scene. We don't know why.
I want all my
Yeah.
music in
The
that
next
cell phone. Get
iPhone.
on it.
God, dude. It's just this whole show just refuses to keep to an internal logic. Like it just other than Ring's powerful, Ring's bad. That's the
Well,
only
it's
thing
just-
it can stick to, and not in a consistent way.
Well, it's just in the lore, in the show, the rings are very important. They establish a lore and how it works, and then they abandon it within moments, seconds.
Yeah, we came up with something better.
His
Just now.
son. Let's move on. Prince Durin shows up to his dad, and he's like, "I have misgivings," and his dad's like, "I'll give you your bauble back." And then he goes back to his wife, head hanging, going, "I tried. I'm the prince again, though."
He was really happy with me for some reason.
And she's upset that her husband wasn't more convincing, but got his status back. So never wear a ring. He's probably going to wear a ring.
He's gonna do it.
Definitely.
Anyway, back to Celebrimbor. The conclusion is, let's try harder, everybody. And he gives them an inspiring speech about trying harder. Because
And
that's
this
how we fix
right-
the corruption problem. We try harder.
This right here is where it went off the rails for me. Because he says, we're going to make these 9 rings for the men, and we're going to tie the power of these 9 rings to the 3 I already created.
Okay.
You want to cripple Sauron's forces, destroy the three rings. Immediately, the 9 rings lose their power, and Sauron has no Nazgul.
I'm not following. Would you re-explain that?
So, Celebrimbor here says that they're going to make the 9 rings for the men, and he's going to tie the power of the 9 rings to the 3 that he already created for the elves.
Okay.
And somehow that's going to magically make it all better. And then
Sure, it's confusing and there's no explanation why.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if the power of the 9 rings is tied to the power of the 3, you want to get rid of the Nazgul, get rid of the 3 rings. The Nazgul immediately lose their power, and you're
I don't
done.
think they're thinking that far ahead.
No, they're not. But if you like I said, if you tie that together, you want to cripple Sauron's power, destroy the 3 rings. But
I mean, I guess,
obviously
but
they're
you're
not
thinking
thinking that.
You're thinking
Yes,
in
I
terms
am.
of events of Lord of the Rings, and they don't care if this
Yes,
confuses events later. They don't care.
and you're
I
right,
suppose-
and they don't care. But it also shows that they have not thought this through.
Well, sure. I suppose the reasoning, I guess the idea, is because there's a problem with the making of the 7. So if we tie them to the making of the 3, then they won't have the corruption problem. That's essentially the explanation.
Yeah,
But if that's true, then how come the 9 corrupt people if they're attached to the uncorrupted elven ones?
yeah.
Like, okay, then why would the 9 corrupt anybody? Or
We can
whatever
only-
the explanation is doesn't work. It doesn't.
We can only
function.
suppose that Sauron is going to spit in these ones too.
Did he not spit in the elven ones?
No,
Well, we
Um,
don't know that. That's part of the mystery of the show.
Because the elven ones work, apparently.
right.
The dwarf ones do too. They just make you real greedy, I guess.
They,
Well,
they make
see,
you a bummer.
If you remember back to the first season, Sauron, Galadriel figured out it was Sauron before they created the 3 rings. So the 3 rings weren't created with Sauron's influence. But then he
They
came
were.
back as Anatar.
The 3 rings were literally created with Sauron's influence.
What I mean is
Not the lore,
uh,
but in this show. Halbrand was a part of it the whole way.
Yes, Halbrand was part of it, but they didn't create the rings until Galadriel had kind of chased him away. So he had gone from Eregion before they created the three.
Well, the problem is it's inconsistent
Yes,
as to what that means. Because it's like, does he have to have his hand on the rings in their making?
It
because
kind of implied that.
It's explained that because they use the same way to make the three as the others, it's subject to the rule of the one.
Right. But not necessarily the corrupting part.
Okay.
But if you remember when they created the Dwarven rings, Celebrimbor was about to put the mithril or whatever in the little smelter, and Anatar stopped him, and he was the one that then like whispered to it or whatever, and then dropped it in. So it's kind of implied that he did some corrupting to the.
So he didn't have a chance to spit in the three, but he did for the 7.
Right. And so it's kind of he's gonna have that same opportunity to do that with the 9 here.
Okay. I mean, then they're still corrupting. So
right.
I suppose your argument that if you get rid of the 3, it would get rid of the 9 riders down the road. But if he spit in it, it wouldn't matter. They'd still be corrupted.
They'd still be corrupted, but their power would if the power of the rings is tied to the 3, that would disrupt their power and blah.
Well,
blah,
I suppose they would lose power.
Yeah.
Theoretically, if what he's saying is true.
Right.
That they're
tying obviously,
it to the other, like we're assuming that tying it to the power of the others means that they have no power if the others don't exist, I guess, is what we're doing.
Yeah. And obviously I'm extrapolating this, but obviously the show has no internal consistency or logic, which means that that what I'm saying here doesn't actually mean anything. I understand that, but I'm sitting here going, you're not thinking this through, people.
I don't think they care much about whether it's consistent with the Lord of the Rings story. No. My problem was the issues with the internal logic of its own creation. I mean, they could literally go and this damages anything that happens in Lord of the Rings after this, but it doesn't matter to them because that's not a show they're going to make or they care about. It's a way. So it's irrelevant to them. They don't care.
Very true.
At any rate, he gives another little speech and Celebrimbor has a emotional breakdown. He starts falling apart and he's really upset. And we get the orcs out in the daylight, apparently under the trees, because they tried to make it justified in some way. And they're creeping on Eregion. They're like, look at that place. I don't like it. We go to Gil-galad, and Gil-galad's talking to Elrond, and Elrond's like, we need to go after Adar. And Gil-galad's like, no, because my ring says Sauron in Mordor. So the ring's lying to him, I guess. The rings are wrong. Or at least his ring is wrong. So the elven rings are not that great, so apparently they do corrupt, even if Sauron wasn't there.
Well, deceive, maybe not corrupt. I don't know.
I mean, it's deceiving him.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem with the show. Every ring is treated like it's almost like the One Ring, even though they're not.
Yeah.
And every ring misguides everybody. Even though that doesn't make sense, every ring shouldn't act the same. The elven rings are supposed to be more pure or whatever.
Yeah, but we all know what the One Ring is and how it kind of works, or at least acts, so therefore they all act like that.
Yeah, because of the One Ring, we're supposed to think that all rings act like the One Ring, because we saw it in that movie we all like. Anyway, here's Galadriel in a little thing, and they let her out despite her tiny, diminutive size. She's treated as like, they opened a thing and a bull came out that can kill them all easily. And she hit a prison shank and pulled it on Adar.
Can I just tell you that the fact that orc was taller than her was really funny to me. And is
Yeah,
indicative
she's
of
not
how
an imposing
garbage
figure.
The show is.
No.
Fake it. Set up the scene so she's taller than him, even just a little taller. Fucking kill me, my God.
They did it with hobbits. You could do it with taller people.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, and
They have the
The
molten metal on
fact
the spin cycle.
the fact that the Adar here is like, I didn't bring you here as a prisoner. I brought you here as a potential ally. Like, oh my gosh.
That's supposed to make everybody go, oh, snap. Even though it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. For the last
Yeah,
episode,
exactly.
I gotta see the next one. What are they thinking? Maybe Galadriel will commit war crimes in an effort to take out Sauron.
Oh, you
By
know,
You're
siding
not
with the
making-
orcs and killing elves.
You're not making the story more compelling by making the orcs misunderstood bad guys here. It does not improve the story at all.
No, but this is a grievance we had last episode. But it looks like they make the 9. They spin that spin cycle. And the episode's over. I think we've been as thorough as one can possibly be.
Probably a little too thorough.
Silver, what do you think?
I'm so tired with these.
She's given up.
I liked more focusing on the dwarves, like I said earlier, but then again, a lot of stuff with the dwarves didn't make sense. I liked more talking about the rings, but then a lot of stuff with the rings didn't make sense, so it was just a bunch of back and forth. Like,
And this is
oh,
considered-
maybe. Oh, never mind, you ruined it.
Well, this is considered by some to be the best episode, so far.
It was... I'll rank it eh.
All right, that's a precise unit of measurement, Ross.
Everything's rushed. They refuse. I mean, this is just clear evidence that they are refusing to actually write anything even remotely long term to try and trickle like threads along even a little bit. I mean, this episode was whiplash as far as some of the plot points go. It's just smashing through like, oh, look, see, he's manipulating, and they show him quote unquote manipulating like 3 or 4 different times in this episode. He didn't do that fucking once in the last season.
Nope.
Like, it's just I don't know. This episode is really frustrating in the fact that it's trying to rush to show you all these character points and these points of problems with these rings, and when they should have taken it slower, but at least it had some excitement in it, I guess.
Sure, Jason.
So, like you said, there's some people that have designated this as the best episode so far, and it seems like they've been saying that because things are happening. I would say that this is one of this isn't the worst episode so far, but I would say that it's one of the worst episodes so far, precisely because of them trying to make things happen.
You
And they're
say
trying
that
to make
every
things happen.
episode.
Well, it's like you said, they introduce something and they immediately contradict it. Character motivations, flip-flop. Well, yeah, there's more things happening, but there's more stupid stuff happening. So I don't know that this makes it any better. I still think I hate episode 3 the most so far, but
Oh,
I
okay.
definitely don't think that this really has improved much.
By the way, you're not required to hate this show. You can like it.
No. Please, if you like it, go for it. But
Well,
I
I'm
can't.
talking to you. Just because I
cannot
have
like
problems
the
with the
show.
plot, you're allowed to like it. But Jason refuses to embrace that. All right. I think I've described exactly how I feel about the show pretty much. episode 5, everybody. We got 3 more to go. We'll see where this dumpster fire takes us. But I appreciate everybody joining us for this wonderful ride. Like, comment, subscribe, I guess.
Engagement.
Subscribe, dog.
Whoa.
Yeah, feel free to express your opinions, whatever. The show is an interesting ride, but we are going to get out of here. Hey, if you like it, man. Like the show, like the crap out of it. But we're going to run away. Thanks for coming along. We're going to call it quits. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Later.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.